She's watching as well. Here we come.
Okay, I'm going to say that's 5 seconds. Okay. Good evening, everybody, and thanks everybody for coming along. I'll start with some introductions. I think I'm probably going to get this all wrong, but I'll try. I'm Martin Gannon, I'm leader of the council. We have a number of officers with us this evening. Sonia Stewart is, as I can see, sitting in the Civic Centre there. Hello, Sonia. And she is organising and in charge of, hopefully, technology and everything will go straightforward tonight. We have also with us Annalise Hutchinson, who is, I think many of you probably either know personally, have met her, or have certainly been in exchanges of emails with her over the last few weeks. And she is our service director who sees over the highways function along with a whole range of other services as well. We also have with us Trevor Waggett. Trevor is our senior highways officer who's been involved in the planning, implementation, and has met with residents and has been involved in sharing information, exchange and answering questions. So many people will know Trevor as well. We also have with us Mark Morley, who's another one of our service directors, but is probably more directly responsible for those who are actually working on site and managing the site. Have I covered all the officers who are with us? I think so. If I've missed anyone, I apologise. We also have, because the ward councillors for Bridges Ward, where Ochre Yards sits, we've got Angela Douglas with us, Councillor Angela Douglas, John Eagle and Bob Goldsworthy as well. Okay. The purpose of there has been a number of meetings, and I know there's been question and answer sessions which I haven't been involved in. There was a online meeting organised for the wider transport changes, and it was clear from the correspondence emails that we were getting that Ochre Yards definitely was the area that was most affected, because it's really in the heart of the town centre, and it wasn't fair that Ochre Yards issues and concerns were being swamped by people from the wider Gateshead, and even people outside of Gateshead. So we have sought to engage in a more bespoke consultation for residents from Ochre Yards. I know I've been down a couple of times to site to meet residents. Had one Sunday morning meeting where I met people. It's difficult because we can meet, or at that time you could meet groups of 6, and then I went back again and following week with Councillor Eagle, and we've met 2 separate groups in one evening, so we've managed to get through quite a few questions. There's been question and answer sessions since then, but we've always constantly promised to have this online question and answer session. This is one, it doesn't have to be the end of this. This is an ongoing consultation. I think it's Jenny who's been really, from the residents, who's been engaging with Annalise in terms of the organisation of this. So I'd particularly like to thank Jenny for our support, and I know Avril and others have been involved in helping us to put this thing together. So that's all I've got to say. That's the background and history. The object of the exercise is to, we have introduced these measures. I think everybody has been involved in I think we've acknowledged and have apologised. I've apologised, definitely, because the way in which they were introduced without adequate consultation and all at one time was not the way we would normally do these things. However, given the very close proximity of the implementation of air quality issues, although I've got some updates on that to give tonight, the Askew Road changes were imperative, so we've had to press ahead with those, but the impact on Ochre Yards is such that we need to work very closely with the residents to resolve those problems. So I'm not going to say anything more. I'm going to ask Annalise, do you want to say something before we start to take the questions? Hello?
Yes, I just thought it was probably worth some context in terms of how we've chosen the questions, because I think that was one of the questions we got asked last time. Yep. So we've had over 60 questions submitted from about, I think there was about 14 different people in the end. There was some of those, there weren't necessarily questions, there were suggestions about how the scheme could change. So we've passed them forward to Trevor, who's looking at that. There were a couple of people who'd missed the deadline. So to be fair, we said, well, actually, given the questions that they were covering were already ones that were along similar themes to being suggested, we'd suggested that they didn't get involved as well. So I think almost everyone who asked a question is involved in some way, shape or form tonight. I just, there were some things that came up time and time again, and I thought rather than cover them in the questions, I can maybe give you a very quick overview up front. So yes, the roadworks are almost finished now. We've got a few changes to make in terms of the barriers and what have you, but we've changed the traffic light timings, and although we're going to keep monitoring, to all intents and purposes, that experimental scheme that we first thought of is more or less in place. The final step you might well have spied this week is the bus lane camera. Again, a number of people asked what we're going to do about enforcing the bus lane on Askew Road. Well, we've installed a camera because one of the things we've noticed when we've been out monitoring what's going on is that a lot of people were driving in that bus lane, and basically the scheme won't work to its optimum potential unless we try and manage that out, because it affects how the traffic lights work at the other end. But Trevor can explain that a bit better because it's sort of technical side of things. It is one of the questions was, is it temporary? Because it doesn't look like some of the works are temporary at all, and I presume that's probably looking at the end of Hill Street in particular, where we've put a proper pavement down, and that's really to do with safety. So there's a lot of things we put in temporarily around barriers, but there's some things that we can't do temporarily because it affects utilities, or we've got to have a curb between cycles and pedestrians or cycles and traffic. So that's why some of it doesn't look as permanent or as temporary as you would maybe expect. But we are in consultation. It's an experimental order that continues for a number of months. And as I say, we're looking at some of the comments that we've had back. And we are looking at all of those suggestions, and I think Trevor will cover that later on. One person suggested in their response that we should publish our response to the suggestions that made, and we're happy to do that. So when we're ready to respond, we'll make sure we do that. And we are looking at all those suggestions and deciding and looking at what we could trial in future and what the impact might be. We've noted what people have said about the needing the quick access to the Tyne Bridge and needing a quick access to the Trinity Square, and we know all those suggestions that people come through, so we're looking at all of that. I think now the roadworks are completed, we're looking at the responses, we're looking at evaluating them. Our aim is to improve air quality. I think one of the questions that came through was, it's all very confused, what actually are you trying to do? Well, ultimately this scheme was designed to tackle air quality. We knew that the Tyne Bridge needed to reduce down to reduce capacity. If that was going to happen, then we needed to do something in surrounding roads. But to do that, that's about managing the capacity on the road. So it's not just for cars, it's for other things. So this scheme is around cycling and walking. It's also hopefully about improving the bus lane as well, and the access between the Newcastle and the quayside. So we want it to be that we're looking to throttle the number of cars in and around that area and trying to use the extra road space to help with cycling and walking. Quite simply, if we're going to meet those challenges we've got around air quality and around climate change, there is going to have to be quite a change to how people use their cars and how many people use their cars for those smaller journeys. I think that's probably about it. One of the questions we were asked again was about taking account of traffic levels as well and how they'll rise after COVID. And again, I think that was why we've acted now, because ideally that won't happen. If we can do something now and it works, then ideally we can try and keep the traffic levels as they are currently, or maybe even a little bit lower in an ideal world, and that'll help us get towards the quality targets we've got. So that was it really. I think that hopefully covers some of the issues that maybe aren't picked up in the later questions. So back to you, Councillor Gannon.
Okay, thank you. Rather than waste time any further, so there's more time for questions, and hopefully, you know, that gives people an opportunity to come back on questions as well. I'm going to go straight to the first question, and that's from Heather Jones. Heather.
Hi. My question is in relation to the Network Rail structure PLG21B, which is the Wellington Street Bridge. It feels very dangerous to reduce access in and out of the estate, which was limited enough beforehand, especially with only access now being under a Network Rail structure that is known to be in extremely poor condition and is likely to require a large number of road closures for inspections, repairs and regular monitoring. And I believe another person also asked, what's the plan for when Network Rail need to close the only entrance and exit of the estate to work on the bridge, as they have already done 4 times in the last 10 years?
Yeah, I'll pick up on that one. We've been working with Rail Tracks consultant Amy around the proposals. Previously, they closed the road because there was an alternative access. They've known for some time now that we're going to put it into the format that we are now, so we're working around with Amy to facilitate that, so that we will be retaining access into the estate whilst they're doing the maintenance and the inspection works. They do have some works coming up. That was going to be in the next few weeks, but that's now been put back until January. So I've been in dialogue and we're fully aware of the issue and the maintenance requirements of the bridge. And we have been working with Neil and their consultants around that. So we're fairly confident that we're okay on that.
And what about when they need to close the road completely to replace that bridge deck, which is the plan in the near future?
It's a case of crossing that bridge when we come to it. I have never came to Gateshead to advise that is going to be replaced in the near future. So when that happens, then we'll have to accommodate whatever's required around that.
Well, they are actively looking at that. I work at Network Rail, so I know that is something they're looking at. They might not have got to the consultation stage with yourselves yet, but it's not going to be physically possible to do a bridge deck replacement with that being the singular access.
Right, well, can we, I don't, Trevor, can we, I mean, it does seem to me that there's a single access, if there's a catastrophic collapse, let's just put it that way then, right? Okay, I mean, highly unlikely, but it's always a possibility. Or I assume that when there was a separate access, there would have been, you know, they would have carried out works under a particular operating model. But if it's the only access, any repairs they're going to have to do have to make sure that bridge remains open, you know, the road access remains open, so that will make it a much more expensive process. But can we get the definitive answer and share it in the, you know, in the, we say we're going to publish the results to these things, because obviously you can't cut off 1,000 residents if there was either a catastrophic collapse or works that required it to be closed. Okay. All right. Okay, if we can get a full written answer as part of the response, okay?
Thank you.
Anything further? No? Okay, right, we'll move on to the next question. Sorry, my apologies. It's because the machine locks up. Okay, sorry, the second question is from Adrian Curry.
Yeah, so my concern or question is, whilst coming down Prince Consort Road, behind Wilco, when you get to the bottom of the road where there's 3 lanes, the middle lane is for Ochre Yards residents, the right-hand lane is for buses. When you travel around together, the buses invariably encroach into our lane. It's happened to me 3 times now where I've actually had to brake hard to miss the bus. Clearly, in my opinion, the footpath is far too wide and should have been narrowed to make both lanes wider. That's the first part. The second part relates to, whilst leaving Ochre Yards, coming under the bridge we've just been talking about, turning right to go towards Askew Road, Prince Consort Road comes down and the 2 lanes merge they merge onto Askew Road. Twice I've had an articulated wagon come around at the same time and I've been forced onto the wrong side of the road. Fortunately, it's been 6:15, 7:15 in the morning, so I've been able to miss the large vehicles coming down. Again, the lanes haven't been designed adequately to allow two traffic movements to merge onto one road. The third part relates to, and you've already answered part of it, relates to traffic going across towards Scott's Garage. So what's the intention for people being able to get into Scott's Garage? And the part you've answered relates to the enforcement of cars and inappropriate vehicles going into the bus lane, which invariably backs up back onto Askew Road. So we end up in the queue on Askew Road, and we also can't get out of the estate because buses don't understand not to go into keep clear areas to block the estate up.
Okay, I'll pick that up. After your concerns were raised, I've been to site, coming down Askew Road and turning right in. I did witness one incident where it was a car came in front of a bus. Other than that, whenever the turn manoeuvres, when I was on site and I witnessed it, the turning manoeuvres work well. There's plenty of road space to carry out that manoeuvre. In there, we've done electronic tracking of that with the computer systems as well. There's plenty of space. So the only time I've seen it was actually driver error that affected the situation there. We'll monitor that, and we'll obviously keep that under observation to see where that goes. Same as the turn into on Askew Road towards the Redhuff. I've been there, I've witnessed articulated vehicles turning into there, and they haven't went across the lane. So whether that's just because of the driving or not, I don't know. I haven't had a experience.
I have come onto the lane, in my opinion, means that they're not deliberately doing it. So there's something wrong with the road layout.
Yeah. Like I said, we've just got this in the last couple of days, so we'll spend some more time looking at that and seeing what the actual effect is, just to ensure that everything's okay. The first look at it indicated that everything was okay, but because of the concern raised, we'll keep that under observation. We'll go out there again and look at the situation. Maybe get a camera survey to see what's going on, see if we can resolve any issues on there. Access into Scott's Arches, as it is on site now, you can go across the lights, turn left into Scott's Arches, into his yard, and then you can come back out, turn right, and access that way. Take on board your point regarding the vehicles and the backing up. It's the inappropriate use of the bus lane that's causing us problems. We're getting vast numbers of cars using the bus lane in there, and that's one of the reasons why we're keen on getting enforcement. Once we get the cars out of there, we'll get a longer stacking length for buses, so they won't come out the back as they currently sometimes do and block Wellington Street. That's not what we want. So that's why we're progressing ahead with that. So hopefully that will resolve once that enforcement's in place and people realise that they can't use it as a shortcut through.
What is the time frame on the camera? And because I know once these things are introduced, you get things like grace periods. What's the plan for the rollout of the camera, Trevor? Yeah,
the camera's getting turned on at 1:05 midnight tonight.
Right.
And for the first 2 weeks, only warning notices will be issued. So you'll have 2 weeks of grace, for want of a better word, and letters will be sent just to advise people in case they're doing it accidentally that they shouldn't have been there in the first place, and then we'll start issuing penalty charge notices from that point.
Okay, thank you. Adrian?
Sorry, can I just ask something about signage? The signage is dreadful as well. There's just no signage. People are still getting lost coming down there because they think they can go into Ochre Yards and cut through. There's no signage at all on that road to say it's a no-through road to Ochre Yards, or even that it is access to Ochre Yards.
Right.
The advanced signage, there's two big advanced signs, one near the garage as you're coming in from the west, which clearly says that to go to Newcastle Gateshead, you turn right at the junction, and that's reinforced at the next junction as well, which tells you straight on is into a bus only area, and turn right for Newcastle Gateshead and the like. So there's two big signs there currently. We changed them as part of the work, so we'll put patches on them to, obviously because it's experimental, we'll just put patches on to divert traffic that way. I appreciate people are still going straight on. I think that's just through use, because people have always went that way. You find that locals don't necessarily read signs. They go a certain way, they always go that way. And we obviously hope over time, and I think that is the case. When we first did it, there was lots of vehicles turning in, but I think that's died off a great deal when you go down there now. People have realised that that isn't the way to go.
No, they're still turning into Ochre Yards. There
will be some, which I would anticipate will die down over time. From SatNav point of view, we've left the marked as closed on Google and the like through our computer system. So if you're using SatNav on your phones and that through Google, you'll not be sent that way now. legacy products where it hasn't updated. It'll possibly still send people that way, but we've got lots of signs warning that there's bus lanes and no through road in that direction.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would say on that one, Avril, is if there are because I mean, I was aware, particularly in the first week, because I'm getting a lot of emails telling us about cars pulling in and actually crashing into residents' cars and that sort of thing, lorries coming in. So, I mean, if that's persistent, if there are still cars coming in, then if we're going to get suggestions, I hear what Trevor's saying, we've got all the signs out that we can, but if there's suggestions that residents think where we can actually, if there's a specific sign or location which would strengthen it and make it clear, could you let us know, and we'll find out if that can be done. All right.
Thanks.
Okay. All right. My apologies again. And are you happy, Adrian, with that response? Or I'm not saying you're happy. I'm just saying have you got a follow up or anything like that? No.
Just some feedback, and I'll start taking photographs of buses encroaching into the lane and on both directions, and I'll send them in to you because it happens every time I go past. Yeah,
and I think Trevor was saying that we will keep it under review and monitor it. You know, he's been down south himself personally and viewed it, but we'll continue to monitor it. And if there is a problem, we'll have to take remedial action. Yeah.
Can I say on that one as well? We do meet the bus companies regularly as well. So if you do have those photos and you have times when it's happening, we can make sure that we'll highlight that to the bus companies as well. And next time I'm due to meet them, I'll mention it to them as well, the concerns, and see if they can get a word out to their drivers as well about what the feedback's been.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. The third question is Lewis Blakey.
So I'm going to read out the question on Lewis's behalf.
All right.
So his question is, it seems the objective of the council is to purely move the pollution as opposed to tackle it altogether. Are you measuring and sharing the impact of the pollution in surrounding areas? There seems potential for this scheme to report false success in reducing pollution if it is moved rather than reduced. Others have asked, if pollution is such a big problem, how come buildings are being refurbished in the city centre, and how can pollution be improved if it's forcing Ochre Yards residents onto a longer route to the Tyne Bridge?
Okay, I can answer that one to some degree. I totally understand how it might seem counterintuitive in terms of, you know, moving the queues elsewhere and moving traffic around. And I think it goes back to what I said in the introduction. Actually, we aren't going to solve the air quality problem. We're not going to solve, you know, we've declared a climate emergency and saying we want to be carbon neutral by 2030 in Gateshead. We can't do that if all that happens is people still continue to use the cars in the same way they do now. We will just be moving the problem around. So there's two things. There's the short-term issue, which is we have a directive from the government which says you have to fix the exceedances of air quality on the Tyne Bridge and also on the central motorway in Newcastle. So that therefore forces us to do something quite quickly in terms of looking at what we do around the Tyne Bridge. And so that's why we've looked at Askew Road, we've looked at other things in and around the centre. But in the medium to longer term as well, we're going to have to look at what we do around how we encourage people, what incentives we have for people to improve their cars, to more modern vehicles, what we do about businesses changing their fleet to electric vehicles and upgrading them to improved. And one of the asks we've got for government as part of the air quality work is funding that we can offer to business for that. I think looking at the question, the other thing was about monitoring. So there's a number of monitoring stations around the centre. There's one on the Tyne Bridge, there's one on the Felon Bypass, there's ones on the A1. And that information, I think we've got a link to it on our website. So it's publicly available and it's updated on a daily basis. But one of the difficulties, I suppose, with air quality monitoring is if you look at it just on a daily basis, or even if you just look at it on a monthly basis, it probably doesn't give you a true picture. And certainly the government, when they've looked at the exceedances on of nitrogen dioxide, they look at it on an annual basis, and the work that we're doing with government to look at the modelling and seeing what the impact might be, that looks at what the air quality impact will be over a year. So it's quite a complicated picture in terms of what the issues are and where they are. I think, to summarise, it's a difficult balancing act. There's things we've got to do now because there's a problem on the Tyne Bridge and in the central motorway, and that's where these road changes and looking at capacity comes from. But in the medium to long term, there's also other things we've got to do just to basically tackle it across the board. And we are talking to other authorities, and we're talking to local communities, we're talking to businesses about what we can do to help with that, because we realise it's not an easy thing to do, but it is something that we are going to have to do.
Can I say a couple of things as well, please? Sorry, on this, because I think Annalise has covered the fact that in the what we'd want to do is to reduce the level of pollution overall. Okay, I mean that would be our aim, because there's no such thing as a safe level of air quality. There's legal standards, but just because you reach a legal standard doesn't necessarily mean that it's safe. And there are also issues related to climate change and the council's ambition to reduce or improve air quality because of the impact on climate change. So the aim would be in the long term to reduce the level of traffic. But the short term is that we have a legal direction that by beginning of 2021, by the latest, these exceedances have to be rectified. I did indicate to some residents when I came down and met you that I was actually expecting to have a meeting last week with Newcastle City Council on the 25th and the Friday, in fact, to where we were going to go through the actual time frame of this, because it's likely that the works will have to actually start now. It's going to be implemented by January. Initially, I was being told it would be September. Well, I mean, we're at the end of September now. I was aware that there were some issues about difficulties about procuring the technology, the cameras, because there are number plate recognition technology that needs to be installed, if you remember, because vans and lorries are still, although the proposal has been rolled back to charge cars, it's still the intention, sorry, to charge commercial vehicles and buses to use the bridge. And I'd been informally told that it was likely that we were not going to be able to get that technology in place until about March. So although the road changes have been made, the actual number plate recognition technology will probably not be available until March. Although that effectively, I suppose, gives an elongated period of grace to those that would have otherwise been charged. Unfortunately, on Friday at that meeting, I was actually in the meeting. It started and it was cancelled because we actually had to deal with other things. There were issues ongoing with the Secretary of State for Health and about the restrictions that were being introduced about COVID. So that was cancelled because both myself and Nick Forbes and the Chief Executives had to get involved in other meetings. So that's been rearranged and I don't know the date for that yet. So I don't know the precise timings and time scale of what's going to happen on the Tyne Bridge yet. The last point I made was, sorry, somebody mentioned about development in the town centre, the quays and other things. Okay, the air quality issues, the legal exceedances are on the Tyne Bridge and on the central motorway, and it's not traffic coming into Gateshead. It's not your traffic. It's traffic passing through Gateshead. It's people. It's the tens of thousands of cars that come from outside of Gateshead that pass through Gateshead going somewhere else. That's where the bulk of the pollution comes from. So I don't think the issue about development and sort of development, whether it's Ochre Yards or a commercial development like the Quays development, is actually going to compound that problem. What we need to do is to reduce the level of volumes of traffic passing through Gateshead. That's the issue.
I think the area that I think Lewis was talking about was on Curzon Place,
right?
And also the quayside, so the Gateshead quayside. You would have to sort of head towards the Tyne Bridge and to access those areas. So if pollution is such an issue, why are you building and regenerating these areas that's going to increase the volume of traffic to access them? And they're using those routes to access.
Sorry, I should have answered that. I've just realised I missed that bit in my answer. When we looked at what we needed to do in terms of economic development in our local plan, one of the issues was we had to look at where the most sustainable locations were for development, and actually the centre of Gateshead and Newcastle are the most sustainable locations, because that's where you've got the most chance of people being able to use public transport and be well connected to public transport. It's probably the area where you've got the largest number of population in terms of people being able to walk and cycle to their place of work. So we actually actively looked at encouraging growth in the centre. What we do when we get development and when we're assessing it, if it's a big development, then they have to do an environmental impact assessment, which looks at air quality. But on all developments, we expect them to look at green travel and produce green travel plans. So those two particular developments you're talking about, I think it's a difficult one, isn't it? Because in the northeast, development is important. We need those jobs, we need that development, but there is a balance to be made. So what we try to do is make sure that we mitigate some of the adverse impacts. So, for example, the office block down on the quayside that you're talking about there, what we've talked to them about is sort of a green travel plan. How can you encourage as many employees as possible to, if they do have to travel into the office, use public transport to fund cycle schemes, so the cycle to work schemes and that kind of thing. So that's what we tend to talk about and try to encourage over time. I do think the air quality measures are going to be a bit of a game changer, and that might well actually, I think for a lot of businesses, that'll be something where they realise they are going to have to think about it. And maybe also, the fact that a lot of us are having to work from home as well. Again, that's always been something that's thought of as very difficult. Actually, in the future, will it be the case that everybody works from an office 5 days a week, or will there be less hours worked there and offices will be used in a different way? You've probably seen there's a lot of discussion in the media about that now. So it is a period of massive change, and in a way it's impossible to know exactly how things are going to change, but other than they will.
Sorry, Martin, can I ask a quick question based on what's just been said from Annalise? So
yes, Adrian.
I might have missed something, but I thought so. So can you clarify if the funding for all this is down to emissions or down to COVID?
Sorry? Sorry, what I was saying was I was meant to be at a meeting on Friday where because this is a joint project between Newcastle and Gateshead and actually North Tyneside. So that we have to meet together to go through at the time frames, and that was when I was actually getting frustrated because it had taken about 3 weeks of that to get, and I knew that meeting needed to take place. I was actually sat in the meeting like this on a laptop when we were called away to another meeting, the chief executives and leaders, into discussion about issues related to COVID. So the air quality meeting had to be cancelled, and we're having to reorganise that. So sorry, I can't give you a time frame of exactly when the air quality works are going to start. But when I do know that, I'll let you know. That was what I was saying.
So is the works which has been done up to now, is that funded by COVID or by some emissions funding?
It's sorry, I can answer that. Yeah, there's schemes that we've developed for air quality, and this is part of that scheme. And we have put a draft business case into government, and we're having to follow that up with a final business case. And that final business case will basically say these are all the measures we need to put in place in order for air quality to be addressed. And that'll include physical engineering measures like changing roads. It'll cover grants that we want for, I don't know, for example, I suppose taxis and what have you. And we're busy working on that now. I think currently we're hoping that that'll be ready in November time. But obviously some of the experimental work we're doing now needs to feed into that. So when we put that final in, we will be asking for money from the government. But up till now, we haven't got any certainty on the money we're going to get from the government. And that's why we have put this in as a temporary measure. And the funding for what we've put in as a temporary measure was from the government, and it was for temporary cycling and walking schemes that were already designed, that could be brought forward very quickly in the space of 8 weeks to deal with the capacity problems that they felt there was going to be on public transport if everybody went back to work and had to socially distance. So the funding is from it's cycling and walking. It's a government scheme. Okay.
Well, the other factor to consider there, so ultimately the air quality issues as part of the business plan, where we've put a request in for funding, and ultimately the government has to release the funding for that. For example, the technology, the number plate recognition. If you remember, also we actually asked for the £40 million to repair the bridge, although they knocked us back on that one, because the line on that one, of course, was, well, you're going to have to repair the bridge anyway, aren't you, whether this is narrowed or not. And the other thing to build in, of course, is that and the government will calculate this, I've absolutely no doubt, that there will be an income from the air quality zone, you know, the vans and buses that will be charged to enter. The income that's generated from that has to be used as part of the offset against the costs.
So can I just sorry to labour this, so the Askew Road, where you made it bus and cycle lanes only, I don't know what the cycle lane purpose of that is, but so that has been covered by COVID funding and not emissions, because surely doing that for emission purposes.
What we were asked to do by the government was to come forward with schemes that were already designed. So we had a scheme that was more or less designed for air quality purposes. Obviously, if you look at the bigger picture around air quality, the first thing we were looking at is reducing capacity down in terms of looking at how things linked in with the Tyne Bridge. The second thing we were looking at was how do we encourage as many people as possible to use a sustainable form of transport, be that buses or cycleways. So again, that was why the design is the way it is. So the cycleways are, because the cycleways is part of it, that's how we put that forward as a scheme that was ready to government, and that's how they funded it. So that it's funding that came through from the government for a temporary scheme that will deal with encouraging cycling, and then that's where it came from.
Okay. Right, I'm going to move on because of time. So we're on to question 4, and now it's Jenny on cycling changes.
So have you seen a rise in cyclists? The cycle lanes up until about a week or so ago were blocked by cones and roadblocks. If the funding was used to improve road for cyclists, why haven't the cycle lanes opened? Well, they have now. Has anyone from traffic management tried using the cycle lanes? They have been very ill thought out, as there are other cycle lanes closer to the bridges.
Yeah, so I'm going to answer that one. I think, yes, you're right, the roadworks have only just been removed, so it's probably too early to draw any conclusions about you know, how successful they're going to be and how well used they're going to be. What we do know is that there has been a huge uptake of cycling during lockdown. I think from the information we had across the northeast, it was something like a 300% increase. I mean, that's certainly died down more recently, but even so, from the cycle counters we've got and from the measurements that have been done, there's still somewhere between a 50 to 100% increase from where we were this time last year. And we know the government's putting money in left, right and centre in terms of trying to encourage more people to cycle. So we're following that by doing everything we can to encourage people to commute by cycle, and I think we've covered in previous sessions why that is. The cyclists also that had used that junction previously had identified it as something that they thought we needed to improve. So there was something called widenmypath.com, where anybody can put down where they think things needed to be improved. So that was one of the areas where it had been identified and where it had been suggested things could be improved. So the cycle lanes on Askew Road, they are temporary. They are there as part of a bigger scheme, obviously, that we were looking at as part of air quality. They're only one part of that. And yes, there are cycle lanes there already, but we're certainly looking at how we improve the infrastructure across the board and link everything together and improve it. I think There's something called Gear Change, which is the government's new cycling strategy, and they are very much encouraging that. So that's something that we're looking at. We'll monitor the use of the lanes over time, and we'll look at feedback as well and see whether they are designed in the best way. Yes, we have had members from our team cycle through them, and they have suggested how things could be improved, both in terms of signage and where some of the bollards are put. So we're looking at that now as well at the minute. So I think it's work in progress. We will monitor it. We will look at it. We'll look at, in terms of that wider scheme for air quality and other changes we've got to make in the town centre, we'll have to look at all of that and see what the best solution is long term. But it's something we put in, I suppose, quite quickly in the short term, in the hope that it would be something that would be used. But it's too early probably to tell how well used it will be.
Jenny, is there anything you want to come back on?
Yeah, I don't think they will be very well used. I think to change the roads for sort of hundreds of residents of Ochre Yards, I haven't seen any cyclists on that Askew Road, and to base this all on sort of the 150 to 300% increase in cycling in the summer months when people were furloughed, when we're on a lockdown, isn't very good to base that on, to sort of change all the roads for all the residents. So I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's a good response, or it's a good way to have handled sort of the increase in cycling, if I'm honest.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Well, next question is Paul Hetherington. Paul?
Yes, hi. There are residents of Ochre Yards that have mobility issues and can't either drive or walk to the bus stops, so rely on taxis. In order to access the airport, Gateshead Town and Newcastle City Centre and the quayside, taxi fares have gone up significantly, in some cases doubled, if not more. The mileage added to the journeys is more than the maximum of half a mile, which was quoted in a response by the council. And in addition to this, the additional time spent on journeys and the reluctance of taxi firms and vehicles to actually access the estate due to the additional time spent sitting in traffic is causing people a lot of anxiety and concern. That's the first part of it, from speaking on behalf of people who don't have the option of driving, walking a distance, or use an alternative method of transport. Secondly, I guess the taxi fare increases because of, what some people would view now ridiculous journeys going up to Gateshead Civic Centre. People have had to go into town and back again to reach Ochre Yards. They affect every resident on Ochre Yards, people travelling into town, etc. And I just wondered if, do the council think that's fair? And was this considered? One option would be partly to, when you come out of the estate and turn left, if that bus lane that's got the cameras on now would also allow taxis, they could at least then get over the Tyne Bridge, but that you still have the access to Gateshead Town Centre, where you're having to go up towards the Civic, round again, sitting in traffic just to get to somewhere like Tesco's. I've sent evidence through of taxi fares that have doubled. I think the one to the airport was an extra £8 last week. And just in terms of residents with mobility issues and equalities, I wanted to check what equality impact was carried out when these proposals were considered and put in place.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Trevor?
Yeah, I'll pick up on that. There's a few things in there. I'll start off with the taxis going into the bus lane. It's not something that we'd like to take forward. The junction of Askew Road and the Tyne Bridge approach, the more vehicles we have going through there, it'll disadvantage people coming from other directions. We need to keep as many vehicles as we can out of there because it'll severely impact the north-south flow across the Tyne Bridge. We've got an eye on the air quality that's coming forward, that we need to try and smooth the journey from the Park Lane roundabout and across the Tyne Bridge and across. And by allowing taxis back into that, it would create delays on other sections. So people travelling in taxis from other areas would be disadvantaged by that. So if you're coming from Durham Road, the Felon Bypass, that sort of area would have a disadvantage on that. That's one of the reasons why we didn't allow taxis into there. On the equalities, we had the scheme vetted by our disability officer during the design process. So he went out and did that, and we looked at it. We're not disadvantaging people in particular, but at the same time appreciate that to get to the Tyne Bridge is about a mile or so detour around the town centre at the moment. So that affects everybody, and that's the consequence. It's one of them things when you're doing highway works, it's very difficult to improve everybody's journey and everybody's experience of the road network. I appreciate Ochre Yards residents are unhappy with that because the access on the Tyne Bridge isn't as it was. But it's a bit of a balancing act between how do we get to the air quality standards that are required for the Tyne Bridge and the like, and also the residents around there. And it is a difficult conundrum around that. In relation to getting the Gateshead into Trinity Square, I met with Trinity Square last week around whether we could do something where you'd be able to still come up off Prince Consort Road and into the Trinity Square car park, which would be obviously far shorten your journey into Trinity Square. We've got some draft proposals which I need to speak to them again because it affects their deliveries and the like. But once I've got something from that, then along with the other proposals that we've been asked to look at, we'll publish them and just see where we are. At the minute, we've got Prince Consort Road closed. Lambton Street, closed off on Prince Consort Road. That was just a trial to see how it worked. We're concerned about that becoming a rat run because you can come up Prince Consort Road, cross Trinity Square and onto the Tyne Bridge that way. So we didn't want all the traffic just to translate onto that because the junctions just wouldn't cope on the far side Eastgate, and it would lock up Trinity Square with traffic that wasn't going anywhere. So we've looked at a number of measures, but at the same time, at the minute, it's about a mile extra to go around, and that will impact on your journey times and also taxi fares.
Okay, Trevor, so if I heard that correctly, that we are looking at a proposal for Lambton Street, but we do need to go through that with Tesco's first in terms of their deliveries. So it isn't that we've rejected, it's that we think we've got a solution, but we need to make sure that it's working. Okay, Paul, do you want to come back?
I mean, I appreciate the point. It just in terms of you wouldn't want a disadvantage of that tax users. I think it just feels like Ochre Yards residents in particular are being disadvantaged as it is with this scheme. So it would be, I think it would be appropriate to consider treating them differently. I mean, a £7.20 taxi fare to the quayside, which was £3.20 prior to this scheme, is, to me, it's a disadvantage. And the access to work scheme that supports people with disabilities measures on distance. It won't include time sat in traffic. So already fares for those residents that, for example, it's capped at £6 from here to Newcastle. So you're now going to be asking those residents to exceed what the government deems is fair for them to pay to travel to work.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you, Paul. Can I pursue another, Trevor, just to clarify an issue in my head as well, because I hear what you're saying, that what we wanted, it's everything has a consequence. If we open up for taxis along Askew Road onto the Tyne Bridge, that just has an impact on traffic going south north, which defeats the purpose. The other thing that we looked at on site when we came down and spoke to residents was if there was the possibility of opening up Hill Street as an access to the Tyne Bridge for residents from Ochre Yards. I mean, the danger there, of course, would be that if that was opened up for Ochre Yards, well, then it would become a very handy rat run as well for people coming along Askew Road. Instead of going up Prince Consort Road and around the Civic Centre, they work out that actually nip through as if you're going to Ochre Yards and then just nip through along Hill Street. So, and that would just become unmanageable. So we did say we'd go away and look at, is there a way that it could be opened up for Ochre Yards residents which makes it in a way that makes it not impossible, but it's so difficult for people coming along Askew Road to you. Have we looked at that? That's the question I'm asking. Sorry.
It's one of a number. There's a question later on where I'm going to pick up what we're actually looking at. A number of things raised. Some things we've implemented, some things are close on the horizon, and we're still busy looking at the implications of the other ones that were raised. So
sorry, I'll preempted the questions. Sorry, I'll wait. Okay, sorry. Right. Paul, is anything else you want to come back on?
No, thanks.
All right.
Councillor Gannon, can I just add, reference the inquiry regarding taxis? It would be very difficult for us to allow taxis who were just picking up residents from Ochre Yards, so it would open the bus lane to abuse for every taxi, even if it didn't have a fare. So it is a very difficult one to manage, because we could have taxis going elsewhere, just running there, activating the lights and causing. So it is something we have considered and we have looked at, but it is very difficult to manage just for taxis picking up fares for those residents that might be affected. It might become a rat run for taxis as well.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Okay, next one is question 6, which I think is again, Janie, you're asking this on behalf of Andrew Grieve. Yeah.
Janie is still on mute.
Okay, Janie.
Yeah, I fear that what the impact will be on all the shops in Trinity Square and the town centre by restricting access to the Trinity Square car park for the above reasons, particularly in the current COVID climate where public transport is being avoided. The arches at Wellington Street are becoming a ghost town. Please ensure the rest of Gateshead Town Centre doesn't follow too. I'd love to shop locally and support Gateshead Town Centre shops right now, but it's just not practical with the new diversion. And that's from Andrew.
So I can answer that. Yeah, I mean, obviously we're really keen that people will shop locally, and we've set up a campaign for shop local and shop safe. So yeah, we all want the town centre to thrive. We all want the shops in Wellington Street and the Arches to thrive as well. We are monitoring footfall. That's one of the things we're looking at. But it's obviously in the current times, it's difficult to determine exactly how much is down to road changes, how much is down to other issues. For example, I mean, we know that a lot of businesses were struggling even before lockdown. We know there's a lot of studies at the minute about how to try and tackle the issue around retail and changing town centres and the way people shop, and you know what the best thing is to do that. One of the suggestions actually is that we should be, one of the 3 key things we should be doing is encouraging cycling and walking, because the thought is if you can do that, then people are more inclined to actually stay in the centre longer and maybe have more kind of linked trips. So rather than zoom up in the car and go to one shop, they would maybe go there and spend a bit more leisure time and do a bit more window shopping, maybe visit a cafe or you know, more leisure use. So I think it's a difficult one. One of the reasons we're looking at the town centre and how we regenerate it is because we recognise actually the town centre hasn't changed that much. Somebody actually sent me a link on YouTube to the road layout in the town centre, and actually it hasn't changed that much since the 1960s. And again, if you look at it, the shops and the infrastructure there hasn't changed that much, and we must be one of the few urban areas where that's the case. So we do need to regenerate the town centre. We need to look at what that means for the future. Is it going to move further north? If we've got more development on the quay side and better links with Newcastle, to all intents and purposes, that what we call High Street South, the bit nearest the civic centre, that probably needs to be residential, as does all the area around and about it, and then that'll help support a more thriving town centre. As Trevor said, he's meeting the Trinity Square manager. I'm regularly meeting them, and also the town centre manager that they've got in place. They've suggested changes of how we change the road layout. That's something we're looking at. We're looking at those alongside some suggestions that residents have made as well. In terms of Wellington Street, we were really disappointed that those businesses that left. We did talk to them about, was there anything we could do as a council to help them stay. What were their concerns? But the top and bottom of it was there wasn't really much we could do. They'd looked at their business model, they'd looked at where they wanted to be, and in Wellington Street they didn't feel was the best place for them currently. We are talking to the remaining businesses, and we do hope that some of the plans we've got in terms of the longer term really will help to get a better footfall in and around the area and help with those links. So I think it's sort of work in progress. We certainly want to make the town centre and the Wellington Street area as attractive as we can and with as much footfall as possible to help those businesses survive.
Okay. Anybody want to come back? I know that Andrew isn't actually here, but anybody want to? Is everyone okay? All right. I mean, in terms of the south end of the High Street, that is very actively the council's plan. There's been a development plan published on that and has been consulted on. The council is, although for many years we've been buying up vacant properties, but without any, definite plan, and we were clearing the sites, but it's got to a stage where it is actually cost effective for the council, because to proactively go in and start buying up properties is an extremely expensive process for a local authority acquiring large sites like that, compulsory purchase and relocating businesses. But it's reached a stage where we now can proactively do that and actually are pursuing a development plan for the whole of the site, which is largely built around housing. Okay, so it's to get a population that will actively support a reduced sized shopping area on the north end of the High Street. Okay, anybody? No? Okay, well, we'll move on to I think it's the last question, because Avril is going to ask, which is described as an amalgamation of a number of questions. Avril, so best of luck.
Right. What is being done to improve access from Ochre Yards to the town centre, which is Trinity Square and Tesco that Trevor's already mentioned, and to Newcastle? That's the Tyne Bridge and also the quayside. There's been a number of suggestions made about change. Is anything going to change? And if so, when? Please, can you clarify if this work is temporary or permanent? And is there going to be any change for us in terms of accessing the Tyne Bridge, Newcastle quayside, and also Trinity Square and Tesco? Also, Martin, you said before that us as residents of Ochre Yards, we didn't cause any of this. We've been penalised by what you said was everybody else travelling through. So why should we be penalised by not being able to access the Tyne Bridge when it's not our fault? You've just said that. No, you give lots of promises and suggestions when on the umpteen visits you had that you would go into saying why we couldn't have number recognition, why we couldn't turn left. It's just not fair. We've been victimised.
I 100% agree, and I have said it openly, that it's almost as if that to rectify a problem which isn't caused by people in Gateshead, because it's people from South Tyneside, Durham, wherever, travelling through Gateshead, from outside of Gateshead to somewhere outside of Gateshead. As a consequence of dealing with that problem, we have 1,000 people in Gateshead, residents of Gateshead, who pay rates in Gateshead, council tax, have been almost sacrificed to the larger need of air quality and dealing with the traffic congestion problems of Gateshead. So I'm absolutely acutely aware, the people who come from South Tyneside don't vote in elections in Gateshead, okay? It's the residents of Gateshead who vote in elections in Gateshead. So this is the top priority, dealing with it for the needs of local residents. And you're right, there is a whole series of, I promised and said we'll do this and we'll do that, we'll look at that, but I need to get definitive answers. I know the aim is we want to ease the access for residents of Ochre Yards to the facilities in Gateshead and to the Tyne Bridge in the best and most efficient way. So Trevor, and I did go through one of the ones which we had talked about, which was Hill Street. I don't know if that, but I've got to take I can push the officers, but I've got to go by their professional advice and support as well. So sorry, Trevor, are you going to come back on these issues?
Martin, can I just
get on? Yeah.
Well, it is, bad for people from Ochre Yards. You've also got to understand that people in the Australian flats, Melbourne Court and all them, have got the exact same problems, albeit their journey's probably about 400 metres shorter to get to Newcastle. because they would have come out of their estate, turned left, went down Prince Consort Road, turned right, Askew Road onto Tyne Bridge. They have now got to go in the opposite direction, so it isn't just Ochre Yards people who are sort of being inconvenienced with this. There is, several, couple of hundred people live in them flats. So the inconvenience is much further wider than what we're currently seeing here.
Yeah, so I mean the point remains the same though, doesn't it, John? It's the residents of Central Gateshead who are paying the consequence of dealing with a traffic problem, which is not, yes, of course, they're driving cars, but it's not actually the couple of hundred, 300 or 400 cars of the people of Central Gateshead that's causing the problem. It's the tens of thousands of cars of people who are coming from elsewhere. So, yeah, Trevor?
Yeah, sure. Like I mentioned before, we're in discussion with Trinity Square to see if we're going to alleviate the issues getting into the centre for residents in Ochre Yards and the similar areas. That will impact their deliveries and how they'll have to work. So we're in discussion with that and we'll feedback on that. We're looking at a number of proposals. The one that Councillor Gannon mentioned there about access from Half Moon to the Tyne and Swing bridges is something we're actively looking at. Access, we asked if we could open it so that if you're heading northbound towards the Tyne Bridge, you could turn left into Hill Street to access into Ochre Yard and Wellington Street. We're also looking at potentially Wellington Street being able to go straight across to West Street, which would then turn left to go towards Trinity Square and beyond, but something else we're looking at. That proposal we're looking at, we asked to look at was the residents to be able to use the bus lane on Askew Road. That's difficult, really difficult thing to manage. Another one was we've got a request from a resident to reverse Fletcher Road, which is the small road that goes underneath the low bridge. So that's what we're actively looking at the minute. They're in various stages at the moment. We haven't had them for that long to look at, and some of them are very, very complicated and not easy to try and square off. So we're actively looking at that. What we're also looking at the moment is improving the traffic signal junction at the junction of Regent Street and High West Street, which is the one down from the Prince Consort Road roundabout as you head towards the Felon bypass. We've got a scheme that we're proposing to put in there as an experimental to try and improve the traffic flow heading down into that direction to try and relieve the pressure that we've currently got on the roundabout there. So we're hoping that we'll get some improvements in there in the very short term. The other one was what we actually have managed to do is the next junction down, which is Charles Street, High Street. Because Jackson Street has got next to no traffic on it now, the Jackson Street, High Street junction and the one on Charles Street, High Street are actually linked. And whatever you do to one affects the other. So we've managed to take some time away from the bottom of Jackson Street, which has allowed to improve the traffic signals on Charles Street. So if you go there now, they're getting far more green time, so we're getting more traffic through there. So hopefully when we get that and the Regent Street, High West Street junction amendments, it'll give better flows on there. And the other ones are bigger asks and stuff that we're currently working on. And like Andy said at the start of this, we'll feedback once we've finished the investigations around that. Right. Well, can I ask because there's a lot there. So I'm going to ask for a favour, Trevor, which is because there are some, it sounded to me there like some of these things are really being actively pursued and are possibilities. And it might be that some of them, because I think I took from what you said there about traffic from Ochre Yards being allowed to turn left onto Askew Road to access the Tyne Bridge that way was incredibly difficult and would have implications in terms of the south-north flow and interfere with the lights there. So I think we're basically saying no there. Let's be really blunt about it. So what I was going to ask was, can we, from that list of schemes which have been asked to consider, put together a one-page bullet point for the residents? I don't know how that would be circulated. I don't know if we've got email addresses or a central delivery point, and we identify those that we just simply can't pursue because we don't think they'll be able to technically or manage them. Okay, but the others like Hill Street that we are actively pursuing and some kind of indication of a time frame, because it's not like just saying to people, "Oh, we're looking at that," means, well, we're looking at it and we'll, months later we're still looking at it. Let's come up with
bit of, just an indicative time frame of when we're going to get back to residents on those. So a one-page bullet point which would say, this is going to be, it's not going to be possible. Okay, well, it stays on it might stay on the list, but it's not possible. But things like Hill Street and the other, Lambton Street, we're actively pursuing that. We're looking at a solution with Tesco's in terms of their delivery, and if we can actually do that, it means that we'll be able to open up access into Tesco's and Trinity Car Park from Lambton Street, and the time frame on that would be within the next month or whatever. Okay, so is that reasonable? That I'm asking that, Trevor. Yeah,
we're well on the way having that list prepared, so yeah, that's no problem.
Okay, anybody want to come back on that?
So this time frame, is it going to be weeks, months, years?
I don't know is the answer, Avril. What I'm going to say is to Trevor.
Time frames, how long is a piece of string? Can we have?
Well, that was the reason why I mean, personally, I could feel people being unsatisfied, saying, "Oh, we're looking at this," right? Because what you actually want is, we're looking at this, and within the next week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, we'll have a definitive answer. It's a possibility, or it's not a possibility. I mean, even if we decided in the next 3 weeks that Lambton Street could be opened up, that actually I'm going to guess would be some works involved in that, Trevor. So it might take some time to actually do it. And similarly with Half Moon Lane, Hill Street, given that we've actually put some hard surfacing in there, curbs and that sort of thing, would have to reintroduce orders and get the work schedules done if we were going to do some alteration works, which might be some weeks. So let's have, what I'm saying is, I don't know the answers, Avril, but what I'm saying is, as quickly as possible, let's define what we can do and what we cannot do, put that down onto a piece of paper, and then residents have something which says, this will be looked at, this will be implemented, this was the time frame. So you have a time scale against which to test us on, to say, you said this would be done by the end of October, you said that would be done by the end of November, whatever it might be. Okay, is that all right?
Right, yes.
All right, okay. Anybody got any other questions? Because we went a bit over time, but...
I want to say something.
Hello?
Sorry, Paul Hetherington put his hand up there just to speak.
Who's sorry, Sonia?
Paul Hetherington.
Paul, please.
Yeah, it was just a follow-on question, really, with regard to ruling out taxis going along that way to the left of the estate. Is the pollution, the expected pollution from taxis, that bad? In that, why couldn't all of them just use those routes? You've got bus and taxi lanes in other areas of cities that work well, that for both the residents, passengers, and the taxis drivers themselves. So, what's the justification in just wanting to exclude the taxis out of a different route?
Do you want to take that, Trevor, or shall I? Aye.
I'm happy to go over that one.
Yeah.
The issue again is that north-south under the Tyne Bridge, the more vehicles will have come from Askew Road creates delays in there. So it's not the case of the pollution from the taxis. Even if they're electric, the taxis, it's not that the concern, it's the actual delays and the implications of slowing the north-south again. And it mightn't seem much, but you get the odd car in there, then it starts throwing the buses in, and then we don't have enough time and we don't have enough stacking space. So it actually puts lots of delays on the north-south. I've been out there and stood there for a long time and watched the cars coming out who are currently illegally going through the bus lane. And sometimes it's only cars coming out, so you've got all the traffic in the north-south held up because the cars decided to come through because the traffic signals have sensed that there's a vehicle there. So it's really related to that north-south flow and how we can get it moving through the scheme.
I think the thing to bear in mind, Paul, is that the Tyne Bridge will go down to one lane. So you've got 8 lanes of traffic coming down onto one lane across the Tyne Bridge. Now there's one, there's just the sheer volume of traffic going south, north, across the bridge, and therefore you want to get it moving that way as quickly as possible with as few brakes as possible, with as few traffic lights as possible stopping people. But also, if traffic is stationary, it's more polluting than if it's moving. Okay, so, and although we've got Askew Road open for buses going through, the buses trigger the lights, and then the bus gets in, but it's infrequently. Once you start allowing taxis or vehicle access onto that road, every single time it gets to the end of Askew Road, it triggers the lights. The flow of traffic south-north is stopped, and that whole rationale of keeping the traffic moving breaks down. So that's the issue. And of course, never mind about Ochre Yards. Taxi drivers in Gateshead generally, well, I know some specifically, are already not happy about it because taxi drivers like to use bus lanes and they don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to use that bus lane. But the issue is that what it does is it triggers the lights and therefore breaks the flow of traffic. The major flow of traffic, the volume of traffic that's moving through south to north. Is that a bit long-winded, but does that help, Paul? I know it doesn't give you the solution you want.
Helps us understand the point.
Yeah. All right.
Can I come in again quickly, very quickly?
Adrian?
If you can't come up with any solution around taxis being reluctant to come into Ochre Yards, or about the costs, the additional costs we're all paying to get to Newcastle or to Gateshead or wherever it is, and I suggest you consider reducing our council tax to compensate us, please.
Right, well, we don't, well, I mean, I'm not sure we can, is the issue there, because we don't actually have that facility. Council tax, I'm not going to go through the council tax system. Council tax was introduced in 1991, if you remember, as a replacement for the poll tax. And it was introduced overnight because the poll tax was so unpopular, and basically it was worked out in the back of a fag packet. And was worked out on the basis of the value of properties as based on 1991 property values, and that's the system, right? Okay, and there's not the opportunity for local authorities to give discounts on the national banding system. So the short answer to the question is no, we can't. Yeah.
Councillor Gannon, it's Annalisa. If I can just add to that as well. One of my other roles is I cover taxi licensing. So if you are, I think, Paul, you did send some evidence through earlier on. I haven't had a chance to see it, but if there's particular firms or you've got any particular evidence around where you're concerned you've been overcharged or somebody isn't actually serving your area or refusing to come, if you let me know and give me that information, I can maybe have some discussions with some of the taxi companies as well.
No, I mean, in terms of, I know it's been said that all taxi firms will be reluctant. If there's any evidence at all of a taxi saying I'm not going to Ochre Yards, then we need to know about it, because that, as far as Gateshead, as the licensing authority would be concerned, that would be a breach of their licence conditions. Okay, so we will enforce through the licence and regulations that every single resident of Gateshead has access to a taxi. Now, I cannot guarantee what the price will be because it'll be the distance that they travel. But what I can say is that every resident of Gateshead will have access to a licensed taxi from Gateshead, because they have to operate under their licence or they'll lose their licence. Okay. Right. Okay. Then we'll get the crib sheet that I talked about with Trevor about actions that we're going to look at, so residents have that to test us against. We'll feed back on all of the and publish all of the data and action points that we're dealing with, and we'll maintain, this is an ongoing consultation, so if we need to organise another meeting, or if I need to come back down on site with ward members or whatever, we'll hold those meetings as well. Okay, probably we're calling into the meeting now.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, can I just
yes.
super quickly, we keep talking about this being a temporary measure. When is the end of that temporary measure? Do we, I know that the plan obviously for yourselves is to implement it permanently for air quality, but technically, when does this temporary measure end? Because
do you want me to cover that? So we consulting under an experimental order that gives us 6 months to decide what we think should be maintained. So off the top of my head, I think that it started basically when the scheme went in. So we've probably got about another 4 months worth of thought before we need to get close to where we need to be. But there's lots of other interdependencies as well. So I think I mentioned earlier, we've got to have a pretty good idea of what we need to do for air quality to submit as part of our final business case as well. That's in November of this year, and we're busy doing modelling around that. So I think the answer is that in terms of these works, yes, they're meant to be temporary, and we need to be coming up with towards a permanent solution towards the end of the year. For air quality, actually, if you look at what the modelling shows us, that situation there is it might be that we just need to have things in place for a year or 18 months. So there's a very short-term thing for COVID in terms of the capacity and what's on the ground now. There's a medium-term thing, which is basically be from the end of the year through for probably 18 months to 2 years to deal with the air quality exceedances and the modelling, which we're currently working on. But what it previously showed us was actually after about 18 months to 2 years, things had improved enough for maybe some of the restrictions to be removed. I suppose the other thing that's going on in the background as well is that we've got to come up with what our plan is for the town centre up to 2050. That's something we've got to start thinking about now. So as part of that, there'll also be further discussions about roads and development and all the rest of it. And I think actually, Janie, we've asked you as the representative for Ochre Yards to be involved in that stakeholder group, which will have that ongoing discussion over the years to come about how we change and alter the town centre.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right, thank you very much, everybody, and we will ensure that we get all those reports back, and if we need to meet again, we'll meet again. Okay, thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.